see the world through other people's eyes. Now, empathy is a quality of character that can change the world.
What unites people? Armies, gold, flags, stories. There's nothing in the world more powerful than a good story. Nothing can stop it.
If you want to stand out from everybody else, you need to get into storytelling.
Draw a different frame around the same set of circumstances and new pathways come into view.
Welcome to Artefact Live with me, Scott MacArthur, where we look at the art and science of story. We don't care who you are, whether you're a bricklayer, a professor or a speaker, all we care about is you being a good storyteller.
Thank God the drummers arrived.
It's time to realise that facts tell, but it's stories that sell.
Get me some nasty and get in now or someone's getting shot.
And that's a niche of a niche of a niche of a niche of a niche. 1,000 comments.
Selling a hemorrhoid cream to someone who's got hemorrhoids.
Got a whip.
I was born into a deep contradiction.
This stuff's magic.
God, that's so clever.
Good afternoon and welcome to Artefact Live with me, Scott MacArthur.
And me, Paul Crick. Hello.
How are you?
I'm very good, thank you. How are you?
I'm good. I'm actually quite chuffed that we got we have to do this on our own this week because I quite enjoy doing this.
An opportunity to go off on one.
Just to go off on one. Yeah. Do you know I used to have a blog called MacArthur's Rant?
Oh, nice.
I think it's appropriate.
Yeah, excellent. Well, listen, if Seth Godin can get away with it, then
well, absolutely.
He calls them riffs. But
yeah, no, quite right. But so what have you been up to this week? What have you been up to?
So starting delivery on a big client project. So doing that and also preparing some of the ground for next year. So I'm going to be doing some virtual team dynamics visualization
nice.
using a tool called ProReal. So I've been fiddling around trying to figure out how stuff works, and it I'm sure you know this. You get little victories. So I've now managed to do the split screen thing in iMovie, which gives me a whole world of has just opened up in terms of the ability to tell a story. It's like, oh, I can do this and I can do that,
Yeah.
and then you go back to the screen and you get script and you go, right, okay, how does that work and what shots am I going to do? So,
Yeah.
Oh, just a happy boy. How about you?
Yeah. Good. Well, I've been doing some work with a couple of clients, which is quite nice. Where one with the Royal Institute of Engineers, believe it or not, and it's been really interesting because, and if they're listening, I'm sure they wouldn't mind me saying this. It's been a classic example of the client not being sure what they wanted, us trying to make sure that we do a good job, but then all the issues between the two. You know, and it's been because at one point early in the week, late last week, it was going to be like a horse designed by a committee, but we've managed mainly through the skills of one of my colleagues. I have to say, she's amazing. Move it towards it becoming, a nice little program again. So that's been one of the things. But I've also been obsessing over. I've started to use Canva about 2 or 3 years ago, right?
Yeah.
But I tended just to use it for like thumbnails and whatever. It's actually a lot better than that. So I'm actually building I've got a keynote on Monday for a company called Interpath, which is a splinter group of KPMG, ironically.
Okay.
800 of them all came away from KPMG to do some mainly sort of program management transformation type consulting, and I'm using Canva to do it for the first time. So I'm quite excited about that because new tech isn't it funny at the beginning of a new tech? It always looks so daunting. Well, like you just said, you know, it looks so daunting, and then it's like, that's how it works. You know, so
Yeah.
I've been,
So the king of live streams.
yeah. Yes, exactly. And I've also been playing with some of these AI art tools, making
I
little
saw some of those.
avatars.
There was one I put a comment on your Facebook because I suddenly thought that really looks like Glenn Hughes in a certain light. There was a cartoon one with a pair of glasses and a
Yeah,
speaker that came around the edge. Looks super cool.
yeah,
But there
yeah.
was a bit because I've interviewed Glenn 2 or 3 times now.
Have you?
I just thought, yeah, that's almost like Glenn Hughes with his big pilot glasses.
Yeah, but I'll not be calling myself the king of rock and roll, whatever he is. He uses his quite a
Yeah,
character,
the voice
Glenn.
of rock and roll,
The
apparently.
voice of rock and roll. Yeah, Glenn, well done. But anyway, thank you. No, it's quite funny because I don't know what the point of it is yet. Have you any thoughts about it? What's the point of that? I mean, I made 100 images. It cost me less than £2.
Mm.
And they're good quality images. They really
No,
are. You know,
they're great. They're fun. It's another way of expressing yourself. I think we had hair dye and safety pins and leather jackets and bullet belts. So it's just another way of doing that in the digital domain. And given that these platforms are becoming sort of a dominant part of life, then how you express yourself is almost increasingly more important. It's a way of daubing paint on the wall without the spray can.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's a bit like, and funny enough, we're going to talk about archetypes, aren't we? But it is like, I mean, I did deliberately put in. It asks you, I don't know if you've done it. Have you done it? Have you tried it yet?
No. I've been messing around with artificial voices because I want a cast of actors to come and play a thing, and I was just having a listen to how good they were. So that's as far as I got.
Oh, I saw Elon Musk playing with one of them. He was very keen on it. Anyway, but no, I guess what was exciting about it was it asked you for 10 images, right?
Mhm.
And I thought about it. I thought, because professional speakers tend to have a lot of pictures of themselves. It's part of the amazing route to poverty that is being a professional speaker. So I put in, and I thought, no, do sci-fi, because that might come up with something I can use in my keynote and do that. And actually, the one that you're talking about with the microphone and I can use that in the keynote because that's very sci-fi and obviously sci-fi.
Yeah.
So yeah, it does have its uses. So I'm going to tentatively use it next week, actually. But I don't know if it's a good thing or a bad thing. But
well, I think it's a lot of fun. I think it gets people's attention.
Yeah,
it's sort of another way of moving away from drive bullet points if we're still using those. But it's a little levity, and also it's a little bit of brand recognition to sort of be stepping out there first with these kinds of tools.
Yes, I'm just waiting for Yes to give me a ring to do the next album cover. You know,
there might be a queue.
So, what we're going to talk about, Paul? There's a couple of things we've discussed earlier, isn't there? So, what was the thing you were getting quite? What's the word? Effervescent about something.
I like effervescent. Yes, aerated and heading towards a high horse. I think. I read this article that was published by McKinsey. Now, I know McKinsey are an easy target, but if you haven't worked with inside the four walls, then I think it's best to hold your powder dry. Even for the likes of us who have worked in consulting and know some of the joys and pains that particular profession can bring at times.
Yes.
But it was a particular view around the topic of power. And I thought that's a topic we don't talk about enough. And I just thought the way it framed it, I ended up coming away from it saying, so essentially it was an article by a very distinguished professor who teaches at Stanford on the subject of power, very popular topic, oversubscribed class as part of the overall MBA course. And I thought, it's a good thing to talk about it and a good thing to teach it. But I couldn't help coming away from it with a nasty taste in the mouth and say, because the premise was simply this. It was, to get something done, do whatever you have to do to get power. That was it. And I thought that was a very poor message in the times that we live in. It's very, very white. I spoke to my wife about it because I needed calming down. There was steam coming out my ears. And Tina was great. She said, well, it's a very white, it's a very male, and it's a very patriarchal view of what power is. And I think there's more to it. And yes, we've all read David Marquette several times, for anyone that's wants to take a pop. But I think power is worth discussing because we assume we are powerless and almost taught learned helplessness.
Yes.
So that we don't think we can change things. And yet, as history has proven over and over again, a small group of people can do amazing things once they set their mind to it. So I thought that was worth a discussion. That was mine. What was yours?
Well, mine was maybe a slightly more positive and therefore slightly less interesting.
What are you trying to say, Scott?
Yeah, I know. Well, I've been looking at, as I said on last week's show, I've been looking at this idea of helping people become future literate. Mm-hmm. And I'm trying not to fall into the sort of the futurist group. There's a lot of futurists out there, and they get it all wrong all the time. And because one of the things I don't believe in is predicting the future. I just don't believe in it. It's just the history of it is Nostradamus is still famous despite the fact he got everything wrong. So it's kind of like building on that. And I was thinking, how do I help people think about bringing the future into their daily lives without it going sci-fi? And I connected two things that I now have found out that others have done the same, but I did it myself. I was thinking about it. Yep. And it was basically the way the future is or sits in the moment, in the now, is actually as anticipation. You anticipate the future. You anticipate a holiday. You anticipate a change. And I thought, so I kept thinking about it. And then I got to the point where if there's no anticipation, there's no change. I went,
exactly.
Right. It's right, isn't it? And I mean, maybe you'd thought about it and had just dismissed it, but I hadn't. I had just not thought about it. And anticipation isn't taught on MBA programs. Curiosity sometimes is, but and I thought, I'm onto something here. So I don't know if I'm onto something, but that's what I've been thinking about is, how does one create excitement for where we could go with our organizations in terms of future literacy. So, and very fortunately, the CIPD have asked me to, I don't know if you do this, they've asked me to be a local business advocate, where you go into schools and you talk to them about going from school to uni to work or school to work or whatever. Mm-hmm. And I thought, they don't teach they don't teach future. In fact, they don't teach any of these skills that are going to be handy, and that's an unknown future. So how do we make the future become a little bit more visible, and how do we help people get ready for it, despite the fact we don't know what it is? Well, let's build some anticipation and or hope for the future. So that is what I've been thinking about this week.
Nice. Yeah. Where do you want to start then?
Well, let's start with you, because I want to hear the effervescence. Because the other thing, of course, is that you sit in our jobs, and I think I know you. Well, I think you've got the exact same experience as me. You know your own stuff, but you don't know what other people are doing as much as when you're working in a company. It's one of the things that I worry about, isolation and all the rest of it. So I want to know what you've been thinking about, because I know what I was thinking about. So power. Let's talk about power.
So power has, and so I did some digging around, because I thought, well, if I'm going to come and talk about it live, then it'd be good to do that. And there's a number of perspectives. So traditional thing, power is control over money, resources, information, and relationships, broadly speaking. I'm sure there's nuances around that, but that's power, and power over and having is about having control. And it was this article was talking about. So this guy's got a new book out about power. So he's doing the rounds about that, and he was talking about, yes, it's uncomfortable, and yes, we don't like it, and yes, politics is sort of the darker side of conversation and culture in organisations. But we should talk about it, and we should learn to play the game.
Mhm.
Well, that started me off right away, because it's like, well,
Play
why
the
are we
game.
why are we playing a game?
Yeah.
And then I thought, well, that just makes me a peacenik. I'm
Yeah.
just part of the John Lennon fan club. I'm just
Mm.
yeah. You may say I'm a dreamer, but I'm not the only one. Would be my retort to that.
On your tombstone.
yeah, I'll leave the keyboards alone. But it just struck me that what bothered me was that if we're teaching this to people, which is just go out and get power and then you can change things, then I find that problematic when we have, we've got the situation that's just blown up and come to a head in Haiti, which I know has been going for years. We've got the Ukraine situation. We've got division, inequality, all the things that everyone's familiar with, the overwhelming problems and challenges that we face in either different parts of the world or overarchingly as a thing. And I'm thinking, but there has been change. And if you take the non-violent approaches, there's sort of more famous ones. Then you've got Nelson Mandela, more famously Gandhi, in terms of taking a non-violent approach. You've got the suffragettes was a bit more of a struggle, but groups of people that haven't had power, but have had an opportunity to create a vision and then follow through on it. And it was because I teach part-time and I teach the topic to up-and-coming leaders or people who are already in senior management roles, and I'm thinking, there's something wrong with that. And if it's wrong, then what do we need to do to make it right? So I looked up I found a study by two guys, David McClelland and David Burnham, and they looked at primary motivations for success. So some people are motivated by affiliation. So I'm successful if I'm part of a management consulting, or I work in a bank, or I work for I work for a global charity, a brand name that has a strong affiliation in some way, shape or form, Friends of the Earth, whatever it is. Others are motivated by achievements, so attaining goals. I need to get to a certain position in an organizational hierarchy, or I've got financial goals, or writing a book, getting personal recognition that gives them satisfactions. And others are interested in power because, according to the study, they wanted to be able to influence others. Now, I could tell you, as a part-time tutor in IBM, as part of their learning and knowledge team, we used to work with the senior grades of consultants moving into senior management. So people moving to associate partner, but particularly had one eye on how do I become partner. So we used to get people in, and they were brilliant speakers. They were really honest, because they would say things like, well, I went for partner because I thought if I get partner, then I'll have the ability to affect change.
Mm-hmm.
And the biggest smack in the face for a lot of them, was simply, oh, I thought it was going to be easy to do that, but actually it's just as hard. So there's this fallacy that in some organizations you'll get to a certain level and then you'll influence others and be able to influence change, which is a good thing, particularly if you want to give power to others or you want to lift other people up.
Yes.
So there was that study. There was another nice study that said, from Psychological Science in 2011, so a bit out of date, but it was contrasting the difference between choice and power. And they said actually they're rooted in the same thing, which is the ability to have control over your circumstances, some autonomy. And therefore, if you lack choice, you seek power because you want to get choice.
Mm-hmm.
And if you lack power, the other way around, then they stand in for one another. And really, the foundation of them both is all about control.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's interesting.
Yes.
Because control, and it's personal control, it's not necessarily, I want to control my circumstances. I want to control what happens to me. I want to control what happens to my family and the people that matter to me. And they said, control is a central animating force in human behavior. And it's much like thirst. The need to drink only emerges when water levels are depleted.
Yes.
I assume they're meant sort of internally as well as externally. But once you've drunk enough, then you don't go after more water necessarily. You find out where you've got access to it, and then you've got access to it. There's nothing like me knowing that there's no chocolate or anything sweet in the house for when I'm working, because I'm like, I just need a taste, a hint of something just to keep me going until the next time I sit down for a meal. So power satisfies the thirst for choice, and choice quenches the desire for power, was their viewpoint. So I thought that was quite interesting.
Yeah, it's quite interesting that, I mean, it's obviously always going to be a topic that we talk about. That's the first thing, and it's embedded, certainly in my experience, in most MBA programs. It's embedded in leadership development programs and all the rest of it. But I guess it kind of hacks me off as well, that article, because power got. I mean, I come from Scotland, so I didn't have a patriarchy; I had a matriarchy. So this is the other thing that winds me up as well. Women are completely controlled in Scotland, always have been. And believe me, try crossing a woman in Scotland, you'll soon find out who's in charge. And all my bosses have been women, apart from one when I came down south, and they wielded power usually, and it's really basic but it was about money.
Okay.
They had the financial clout to control you, to impact your career, destroy your career. They often did. Personally speaking as well. So I was victim of it a couple of times myself. It was very, very difficult. But I'm conflicted by it, because I think we do need some sort of, and you can tell I'm being quite careful with my words here because it's quite difficult.
Yeah.
Hierarchy, some sort of hierarchy, because I mean, I was talking to one of my friends, Ewan Morrison. He's a famous author in Scotland. He's won awards and stuff. He's just had his book has been made into a Netflix series. He's doing really, really well, right?
Excellent.
And he grew up fundamentally in the something like the Finhorn Foundation, which, if people don't know, it's a sort of lovey-dovey cult.
Steady.
Yeah. Anyway, and he's written books and books and books about it, and his conclusion is, utopian perspectives are just as dodgy as dystopian perspectives, neither of which are very likely to work for a number of reasons. That's why cults don't work. Although the Findies have been around for a long time, but they're just really, really good at making shortbread. So anyway, for me, it all boils down to something that I know you and I both are thinking about, and that's we've got maybe 10 years post-COVID to do things differently. And we've got the political environment changing. We've got the safest time in human history, which is another thing that people just don't talk about, but it is. Fewer deaths because of war, and even factoring in Ukraine, it's incredible how safe we are. It doesn't feel that way, but it's true. People thinking that the world's falling apart, it's not. But people are ready because of all of that. They're ready for change, possibly. But the companies and a lot of the people with power are very well funded. Going back to the status quo, very well funded. So I find myself in a position all the time now saying to folk, no. If you want to do it differently, now's the time. The last time we were in this situation was basically 1946.
Yep.
Now is the time to do things differently, post industrial revolution. And I think that a part of that conversation, quite a large part of that conversation, is about power. So, and whether that's the political system, which is clearly not working anymore, there's an argument. If it had the internet in 1960, was it working then either? No, it wasn't really. But it's a lot more visible now. I mean, you imagine Winston Churchill now as an MP. He'd last about half an hour. He'd have no chance.
Yeah.
I'm not sure Hitler would have either. So boom, boom. All that is different now, and it's historically quite complicated. But anyway, So I also got frustrated by it, but maybe for slightly different reasons. I just think things like, and I know we've spoken about servant leadership before. The inverted triangle, that sort of way of thinking. I'm really drawn to that, because it's about leaders taking on a new type of leadership. Supportive. But ultimately, and funny enough, my mate Rob Robson, if you know Rob, do you know Rob Robson? No. Rob is a great guy. He's, it's not his fault. He's a sports psychologist, but apart from that, he's a really good guy. And he put a post up the other day about how do you keep your best people, right?
Okay.
Well, it's obvious how you keep your best people. You pay them money.
Yes.
I mean, all the bullshit around that about creating meaning. I've worked in health service enough to know that they don't stay there because they love their patients, a lot of the time. They stay there because they can't get anything else outside that pays more. Now, that's really cynical, but that's what they'll tell you if you interview them, and I've done that many times. Money makes the world go round, whether we like it or not, and I don't personally like it, but it's so important that...
It's a given, isn't it? You have to work with that.
Yeah, exactly that. And I don't know what the answer is there. I don't know if I'm helping or not, but I think the whole thing around the relationship between power, money, and change is a wicked problem that
Yes.
I'm not sure, the standard of people in charities is not as high as it could be because they don't pay them very well. These are the harsh facts. You're not allowed to say it. You're not allowed to say it. You get deplatformed. But actually, it's pretty true. The good brains go in one direction, and some of the good brains don't. But I'm talking about at meta level.
Yeah.
And how do we change that? That's a big question. So what do you think of that? Have I got that wrong?
I think it was interesting that whatever you think of the Earthshot Prize and the Royals, it got naffle coverage after the event.
Yeah,
nothing.
Yeah, I noticed that.
There was nothing about the brilliant projects that were given the prize, and whatever the criteria were, and whether it was a PR stunt or whether it was real, it doesn't really matter. There's groups of people out there trying to tackle that wicked problem.
Yeah.
And okay, you could be cynical and say, oh well, it's just a PR stunt, and it's a way of greenwashing and keeping everybody happy. But it was just that whole point of, we were more worried about Harry and Meghan's book and this documentary than we're worried about people doing good. And I know we're programmed with negative bias and all that stuff.
Yeah.
We like to go there, but you know what? If you starve something of oxygen, it dies.
Yeah.
And so every time and if money is part of that triangle, then every time we spend money, we make a statement about the kind of life and world we want to be in.
Yeah.
And I don't think we talk about that enough. And I don't
That's
think
a really good observation. That I like that.
Not mine, unfortunately. But it did strike me that every time you spend, so take this Christmas, every time you spend in a small business as opposed to a big business that's got plenty of money, someone somewhere is able to support their family and do what they love and enjoy the life they deserve for the most part. Again, all horrible generalizations, and it's never that simple. Whereas if you kind of go, oh well, I'll just put everything on Amazon, it's kind of like, and I'm not anti-Amazon per se, but you kind of look at it and you go, yeah, I know they got the business model right, and I know it's convenient, but think about the choice you're making about the world you want.
Yeah.
And nobody's without guilt. So I'm thinking of it from that point of view. I'm also looking at it from the point of view of saying, the power to get something done is about lifting others up to do that. Just simply, it's not about putting people on a podium and saying they're gold medal. It's kind of the ones that can't get out of bed right now through no fault of their own, because they've traipsed 2,000 miles from a war zone with nothing.
Unbelievable.
And it's kind of like, there's a place near us called the Atrium in Ratcliffe-on-Trent. Fantastic place. Does this cuisine that's just brilliant, run by a couple from Ireland. They're brilliant. It's It's an Art Deco building, got this beautiful ceiling. And their menu is astonishing. It's like things like Korean chicken with bang bang chips and all this kind of stuff that's just unusual.
Yes.
Their services with a smile and they're beautiful. And there's a girl outside that sells the big issue. And it struck us. So as a result of getting to know her and chattering a bit, and we bought her a cup of tea and we bought some of her stock, it meant we could talk to her. And one of the things we then subsequently found out is that you can subscribe to The Big Issue and you could nominate your seller. And I thought, that's a brilliant idea.
I didn't
What
know
a
that.
brilliant
I
way
didn't
to.
know that. Didn't
No,
know that.
I didn't know that either. So we're going to do that,
Yeah.
which means we can talk to her. She gets that. But what if 10% of the people that went, and I'm not having to go at the atrium, but what if we all took the view of where we spend our money can actually make a statement about that? Mm-hmm. So instead of teaching power as to go grab control and have that, it's just the little things that we can all do. And to look at the different energies of power. There's a big difference between power and force. In martial arts, as you know, I do that when I'm not injured. We talk about the idea is to let go, relax. There's more power in that, and we can demonstrate that physically how that works. And it's kind of like that's what I want us to teach in business schools, and I know you then come up against this tension. Of who pays for it and who's getting the benefit, and big business gets keeps the talent because they send people to business schools. So it's a complicated, wicked problem. But it just struck me that because it was in Harvard Business Review and because it was also in McKinsey, I just thought, there is another story to be told, and we are not thinking critically enough. Was my thing.
Yeah. Well, if you look at Harvard and McKinsey together, I mean, I'm sure you know this, but the top 500 companies in America, over half of them have got alumni of McKinsey Harvard Business School. So you can't make a man change if his living depends on him not change his mind. So you've got a whole there's a barrier there, which I don't particularly blame them for. It's just it's been the way it's been working for probably the best part of 100 years.
But if we always do the things we've always done, we'll always get the results we've always got. So at some point, someone's got to step in and go, can we just have a slightly different, even if it's just an exploratory conversation? There's if you move upstream, people are drowning in rivers, and there comes a point, this was Bishop Desmond Tutu's point. If people are falling in the river, we need to go upstream and figure out why the heck they are doing that. Who's chucking them in, and why is that happening? And we don't seem willing for some reason to do that. And again, I know I'm looking at this really simplistically. I know it's very complex, and there's all kinds of currents. But if we don't start the conversation, then nothing's going to change. And that's the point, really. That's a nice comment. Go on then.
Yeah,
let's take that one.
Scott, hello, Scott. Thanks for tuning in. Would you rather be paid more and work for an idiot? LinkedIn won't allow me to use the more relevant words. Yes. Or less money and work for someone who truly sees you. Right. That is a good question.
It's a great question.
Can I have a go at it first? Because I'll play the bad boy here. Right.
Right.
Most people say they would rather have the second. Right. They'd rather have they'd be happier with a nice manager and all the rest of it. I think that's bullshit, right? Because if that was the case, bad leaders wouldn't last as long as they do. Now, bad leaders always have, I think, in my experience, they have a tread. They eventually get found out because they're bad or nasty. But I think people, and I know for a fact from my experience, people hang in there despite the fact their leader or their boss is a dick. Because of the money. They maybe feel trapped by the pension, or they feel, well, I'll just separate work from my personal life. So the second part of that is the way I think most people would answer it, but in reality, I don't believe that's what most people do. There you go. There's a negative perspective of that question, Scott. What do you think, Paul?
I think I'm with you. I think we can all be very po-faced and say one thing, but we know from psychology that we've done experiments about and I know it's not the same thing, but administering pain to willing volunteers, and we said we wouldn't hurt them, but we end up doing things that run counter to that. And I think if you've got money, that's great. If you haven't, life really sucks. So there is a certain element of that. It's how do we educate the idiots?
Yeah. Yes. I'll get rid of them.
Yes, and that's part of the power play, isn't it? Is sidelining them, and they're not really idiots. They've learned. I think I've been around too long, and perhaps know too little and too much at the same time, that people develop survival strategies, and I think what you see is conditioned strategies that people have learned.
Yeah.
And that's what they apply because it keeps them safe in the workplace.
Yeah.
So it's very easy to sort of turn around and say, oh, well, he or she's an idiot, but actually come away from that and say, well, what if the opposite of what we think was true? What if what is driving them? I'm always love the expression, people aren't their behavior. What is it that's causing them to choose to do that? And once you start to unpick that, it then even the likes of Elon Musk and Trump, who we all like to characterize and lampoon and cartoon and complain about. The interesting question really is, what causes you to think like that? What causes you to want to choose to behave like that? Where did that come from? And when did you learn that? Because you're just letting that pattern express itself through your behavior.
Yeah, no, I agree. Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, the Elon Musk one's really interesting, isn't it? Because he's cut 3/4 of the workforce, and he's barred sexual explicit material involving kids, something that the 100% could never do. And he's done that about 1/4 of the workforce, despite the fact he did it really badly. Yeah, he's got results, and Twitter's still working fine. So
I know.
what are they all doing? Again, I'm being devil's advocate slightly here, but it's interesting that. But no, I'm going to argue against myself now because Scott, I'll go back to your question, Scott. I really want it to be the second part, and I think that the solution to that, from personal experience, Paul and I are lucky, and I think you probably have as well. But we've worked in environments where everybody was really well paid, right? In consulting, in the big consulting firms, we're all well paid, from the chief executive down to the janitor. Everybody's well paid, right? So money is not as big an issue. It is still an issue. You go around the bonuses every year, you hear the issue, but it's not as big an issue as in a lot of other organizations and sectors. And what I still found, despite the fact that money was not an issue, because it's all relative, but up to a point, I don't know if you found this, Paul, but up to a point, intellect and ideas became currency. I made my name in the companies I worked in because, one, I was annoying, and I didn't like the senior people. I don't mean that personally. No. I just couldn't be doing with it when some 26-year-old was telling me what to do. They'd never had a fucking job in their life. I couldn't be doing with them. But I did know they were geniuses. I did appreciate that. But on the whole, they were very, very clever. But on the other hand, the reason I got my reputation was because I was firing ideas constantly at them, right? Probably too many in hindsight. I was too scattergun in my approach. But and up to a point, that got me promoted. It really did. It really, really did. And I loved it until I got to a point when it was all about sales.
Yeah.
So again, in that environment, there's only so far you can go, and it's quite far. It's 6-figure salary. You can go quite far in that environment just by being a pain in the neck and having ideas. But then it all boils down again to money.
But that's the system we work in.
Hasn't it changed?
Yeah, and money is oxygen. Money is money is what allows you to make choices and do stuff. So
Yeah.
I absolutely get that. And,
Yeah.
you know, the sales guys are the ones that arguably are the ones bringing the money in. So, you know, kudos to anyone that's out there sort
Oh yeah, big time.
of putting to, you know, it's incredibly stressful, you know, working
Yeah.
on these massive bids,
Oh,
public sector bids even more so.
geez, oh yeah.
You know, there's plenty of people with scars and all kinds of war stories as to how that is. So I take my hat off to anyone who is in that field and doing that, or whether it's working for consultancies or whether it's, you know, door to door knocking, trying to sell insurance, whatever it is you're trying to sell, you're doing an amazing job,
Even harder.
because you're creating the oxygen that hopefully gives us choice, that gives you choice as well, to have a bit more control, to have a bit more power over what happens. So let's talk about your
No,
stuff.
no, I don't want
No,
to.
all
No,
right.
I don't want to. No, I'm sorry, I don't want to. I've got
Oh,
loads of
okay.
questions for you still. I mean, sorry.
That's all right.
Do you remember the TV show Back to the Floor?
Yes.
Right, those of you who don't remember it, it was where the boss would go to where the customer met the employees. So the chief executive of Asda, she would go and work in the checkout in an Asda store. Now, it ran for about 4 series, and I don't think there was one episode where the chief executive didn't go, "Oh my God, really?" Now there is a politicized. Sorry, watch my language. I believe there's a politicized group that talk about things like you have to learn to speak to power, and it's all about the patriarchy and all the rest of it. I don't buy that, because it's not the speaking to power that's hard. It's exposing reality to power that's hard.
That's a nice
It's much more,
distinction.
yeah, it's much more complex than all this easy, it's all about people that went to Eton. It's all about, that's too easy. It's too easy.
It is too easy.
Yeah. So I think I'd love your view on this, because when you watch Back to the Floor, it's a classic example, and I use it in one of my speeches actually. The music was quite crap, but people remember it, so it's quite good. But it's like, how do we get? It's almost like squishing the organization, to a point where the people who add value to the client or the customer isn't the chief executive. It's the checkout girl or the checkout man or the person who's doing the fixing the plumbing, it's not the boss of that company. It's just not, how do we get that? I mean, that's why I call it inverting the triangle. Because the chief executive, she should be supporting the business, I believe, not necessarily directing it, right? Now, I know that's flawed. I'm not saying that's right. I know it's flawed.
No, I know.
But I'm interested. I'd like to hear your view on that. I mean, we've got time. We've only done 40 minutes. How do we do more of that? How do we get more of these senior people rewired? Because right. So I'm not giving you a chance to speak here.
That's right.
When I worked at British Gas, right?
Yeah.
The chief executive, and I can never pronounce his name, so I can't even pretend to do it now. He's not there now, but Giovanni or something his name was. He was a gas fitter, and he ended up the boss of one of the biggest companies in Europe at the time, 180,000 employees at the time, right? Gas fitter, boss. Was he ever in the media? No. That's a brilliant story. That a guy that used to turn up at your house in a white van, literally, or a blue van, literally, would then fix your gas, and off he would go. He ended up as the chief executive, right?
Great story.
Yeah. Now, that is the sort of story that should, in my opinion, should be all over the place, rather than the other type that get to the top. That's your Harvard, your McKinsey, your Eton, your Westminster Brigade. That it's not their bloody fault.
No.
It's interesting that, and I don't know I mean, Back to the Floor. That's where I started that question. Terrible question. Sorry. It was a rant.
It's a good rant.
Yeah,
It's a good rant. I think the rewiring's interesting, because again, I sort of came at this partly through my career, partly through studying counselling, psychotherapy, and coaching, and on the end of a sort of consulting career that wasn't necessarily sparkling in many ways, and it just struck me that it was a strange way to live life, and yet I'd enjoyed the status of going, swanning around, going, oh well, I turn left on every plane, and I do this and I do that, and maybe it's the benefit of age, and you just look at it, and you go, actually, that was all a bit silly, really, but I guess we all do it, so perhaps it's a human thing, this need for status. And I'd be interested in talking to anthropologists to say, help me understand that, because we're not the only species that do this. In species that herd, group, are social, this need for status and attaining status occurs in other animal groups, and is that part of it? And it's just part of our built-in DNA and essence of being. And that's the way it'll be, and actually it'll never change. Then you look to history and you look at things that have changed and why they've changed, and it's because people bucked the trend and didn't accept the current consensus or agreement as to what people were happy was the truth. And I think that's I think power is a narrative. I think power is a conversation. And I think it's if anything comes out of this conversation, my hope is that people will start to have conversations around power and authority, and how does hierarchy and authority work, and how do we invert the triangle without sort of going to Findhorn and sitting around and not making a decision. There are examples of doing that, and how do we learn from those? How do we lift? Why is it we value certain things? And of course, we can say that because we've got the MBAs, we've done that. We're sort of deeply privileged not to have been those people starting from sort of 100 yards behind the start line. And there comes a point where we say, actually, if it hasn't worked, then the only way to do it is different. Now, I don't want to starve people of oxygen, but I am making conscious decisions around, right, I'm not spending money with you anymore.
No, I think that's right.
And does that matter? Does that materially matter? Probably not.
It does if there's a few million of you doing it.
and that's it. And with the internet and transparency that reveals, I'm curious as to why that force doesn't come together at a scale that in reality, there's 600 people in Westminster. There's 40 odd million of us. All right, let's be pessimistic. Let's take 5 million of us that are willing to sort of try and sit things out and work together. This is why I think cryptocurrency is interesting. Whatever the flaws of that system are, is because you have to say, okay, how we make laws and how money flows. Those are the two of the levers we need to change.
Yes, totally agree. Totally on the same page.
And the cryptocurrency is interesting because it was starting to look like a way of bypassing the current flows of money.
Now this kind of does take me to the thing I wanted to talk about, which is anticipation, and I think we'll need to come back to it. But anticipation for me, and one of the things I have a really strong sense of anticipation for is the future, because of what you just said. Because despite the fact that I'm reasonably literate around currency, around the markets, around the city, I still don't understand why they wield so much power or are allowed to wield so much power. And I have watched very good companies go down because of the relationship with the city, which is daft, that's why Woolies went down. That's why, they made bad decisions, but why did the city have the power to take them down? It's just a bunch of 20-year-olds playing with spreadsheets. That's the reality of it. If you've ever worked in the city, it's unbelievable, it does my head in that they've got so much power, and believe me, I know a lot of them, and that's what they're like, most of them haven't even got a clue what they're talking about, but and that's a really sweeping statement, but I don't care. but one of the things, and I've said this before, and people look at me kind of like, really, Scott? I do think we're at the beginning of the end of the organization. because
in its large scale
and it's the way it
dinosaur
is. Yeah, yeah.
economies
Because
of scale, because it's
yeah,
not working.
it's not working anymore. It did work, and it's been
Yeah.
amazing what it's achieved. And I don't buy into this. Everything that happened in the past was bad, rubbish. We
No.
have become extremely civilized, very safe, healthy, living long lives, well educated, eating. I know there are issues, but it's still the best at times. But the next step, this is why I'm excited about it, is that could all change again, and you and I might just see the beginning of that. And I think that's really exciting, and that's why I believe that anticipation is something we need to work on, because the fact that you touched on it, cryptocurrency is fundamentally flawed, but you know what?
Yes.
Something will work. This is people are so short-minded. We're taught to think like this, linear, the way we think, and of course there's problems with cryptocurrency. Anybody that had any sense of history knows there'll be problems with cryptocurrency. So how long has it been around? 10 years? Not
I
even
don't
that.
know, but that, yeah,
Not long.
that sounds about right.
Yeah. Of course, these companies will come in and out of favor. They'll go bust. They'll reformat. They'll change the way they work. But you know what? Eventually, something will work. And
Barter.
yeah,
I think we should go back to bartering.
well, why not?
It worked.
And why not?
And still
it might
does in parts of Scotland.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. That's where women are in charge, of course. There you go. I'm
Yes,
arguing against
absolutely. Yes.
Yeah. But the whole thing is really exciting because you can see things like, manufacturing being changed because of the nanotechnology that's coming along. You can see, climate change. I'm not particularly somebody who runs around with paint in his face, lying in front of cars, but I am somebody that wants solutions, and there are solutions coming.
There are.
And the future, if you take away what you started by saying about, we all have our reactions and stuff. If you can bear it, and I find it real difficult, so I'm not pretending I know how to do it, but if you can look at it in the cold light of being rational, the solutions are coming, and I believe they're coming fast enough that we'll be all right, and it'll be a better future than it is at the moment. But we're only at where we are because of technology and because of all this stuff, because before we had technology, we were all happy living in our wee villages, but we all died at 35.
Yeah.
So, it's complicated, and I think that's, and maybe next time we have a free-for-all, we're going to have Lego on next week, but maybe we can come back and talk a bit more about anticipation, because I do think it's we've got a couple of minutes. What do you think about anticipation? Is it something you've thought about?
A little bit. We talk about tension.
Yeah.
And the role that tension plays in change. So if you've got a rubber band and it's stretched, then there's a tension in it, and therefore it wants to move to a resolution. So I think in order to change something, you have to create some kind of tension.
Yeah. And
that tension can be created in a number of ways. It can be created by current conditions, because you're in a war zone, or that's one form of tension. But I think there's a more hopeful tension, which is, a realistic view, not sort of through rose-colored glasses, but a view that says, actually, if we come together, there's enough of us, we're bright enough. As a species, we've been incredibly creative and inventive, and to your point, look at what we've done. Then the brain power is there. You also know that for those of us who aren't who are much more vocationally driven, then there are skills that we are currently losing that if we brought back, or we placed equal emphasis on, then we could look to that collaboration. I think that is driven out of vision, and I think we lack a forward-looking vision that is sufficiently compelling enough, to go to the moon, not because it's easy, but because it's hard.
Yeah.
And I love the people that are winning the Earthshot prizes, because they've gone, no, this is hard, but guess what? We'll do it. Companies like Ørsted, have just finished Hornsea 2, the largest offshore wind program. And I encourage anyone that's not seen it to go and look at the
amazing
promotional videos, which, you could say they're sugar coated and they've chosen the shots, and I'm sure it wasn't all sweetness and light, But if you just have to look at what they've done and stand back in awe and go,
Yeah.
wow,
Yeah, without a doubt.
I want to be part, I want to learn from those guys. I want to be part of the people that go, you know what, we're going to stick 500 windmills that are 80 meters tall in the North Sea, probably, you know, not exactly the most hospitable environment, and we're going to make it work.
Yes. Yes.
That's vision. You know, that's great.
Vision.
So where is the vision? Where is the vision that's going to convert our city centres?
Yes.
Into havens of the places that people want to go.
Well, that last statement is exactly it. Because I remember on many transformation programs, one of the first things you do is you say, well, how do we create a compelling vision? You know, how do we create a future that people will buy into? And even that language is wrong. Because what we never did, and this is me, you know, what I never was able to do was to actually create a vision for the future that people were really excited about. You know, the vision was basically, it'll not be as annoying as it was before.
or they did it over there. You like them. You want that. We'll give you that.
Yeah, exactly. You know, and you can have a ping pong table.
Yes.
You know.
Yes. Is that the sound of ping pong I hear?
Yeah. Rubbish. But it was very difficult, and it is very difficult. And but it does make you smile when you reflect back in it, because I also think we've got a huge advantage here because we've been through all of this so many times that you go, well, you know, creating a vision statement that says, you know, the new IT system will make it easier to do your purchase orders.
Doesn't do it for you, do you?
That's brilliant. I'm going to put, you know, I'm going to have that on my gravestone. You know, I help people do purchase orders faster. You know, come on.
It worked.
Yeah.
Instead of I was ill, it
worked.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly. But that though, you laugh. We'll both laugh, and it is funny. But the reality is, it's really tough to come up with a workable vision that's achievable. And that maybe one of the future shows. The other thing I have it's ironic from my career perspective, but we make a lot of knee-jerk reactions. We always have. And even in the days in the 90s when we had 10-year and 20-year plans, it was still bollocks. You know, I mean, show me a company that it worked, but it worked.
I think the other thing when we come back is we ought to talk about the role of the chief executive, because everybody thinks, the buck stops there. It's that person, male or female, it's that person's fault if it goes wrong. Yet we don't really appreciate yet how many constituencies that these people have to contend with and serve. You know, you've got the board, you've got the chair, you've got the stakeholders, you've got the suppliers, you've got the customers, you've got the legal side of it, and they're supposed to look out and be visionary and keep a roof over their heads, keep the family fed, and deliver the results that you're already having to do from one hand behind your back, because the predecessor that was before you kind of left you a bit of a stinky mess under the floorboards that you've just lifted the floorboards and gone, oh my God.
I mean, you can't imagine in politics somebody writing a note saying there's no money left.
They did, didn't they?
Yeah.
Didn't someone say good luck?
Yeah, good luck, there's no money left, you know.
Yeah.
It is a much maligned and much, I mean, everybody, I've often said to people, all right, do you fancy the job?
Yeah, exactly.
And they all go,
I
no,
want us to root for these.
job.
I want us to root for these men and women. I want for people to understand.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. In every profession and at every level, there is always one or two bad eggs that sort of
course does.
that tar it. But we shouldn't do that. You look at Starling Bank as a great way of sort of bringing challenge to the financial services and competing and getting back to, competing is about collaborating to raise everyone's game.
Yeah.
Not just ours.
Yeah.
And that's a conversation, the kind of conversation I want us to have, rather than go, CEOs are crap and they're evil and they're this and they're that and the other. It's kind of like, well, let's set some context so that people get a better idea of what is entailed in that, because it's not simple at all.
No, I mean, well, we need to finish now. But we label people, don't we? And
We do.
we say, oh, you're a chief exec, oh, you must be a dick.
Yeah.
Oh, you're just a bin person, so you must be a dick. Or, oh, and it's all very negative. And thank you, Scott. I see your comment. Really appreciate it. It's very interesting that we all say we don't want to be labelled, but we all seem to thrive in it when it suits us.
If it's a good label, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
If it's the label we want, if it's the right affiliation, and
Yeah.
it gives us the right status, then yes.
Yeah. Well, I think we've got that to right, mate, haven't we? That's been an hour. I knew that would happen. I didn't think we'd a problem filling an hour.
Me neither. I hope it's seemed useful for the audience, because
I hope so.
I want them to think. I want them to think about things that we don't necessarily think enough about, either because we've not got enough time or because we just think, oh, that's in the too hard basket.
Yes.
We're in a place where we need to get stuff out of the too hard basket and go, all right, then what are we going to do different?
There's a lot to do. So next week we've got Tomas coming on from Lego. He's been unwell and rushed off his feet, so he couldn't make it this week. But and I can't wait, because we've got this trilogy that we've been building around play and about all the rest of it. So I'm quite excited about that. So Thomas, we're coming at you, mate, and we've got lots of questions. Don't be scared.
Get well.
Yeah, get well soon. And so thank you very much for listening to Artifact Live with me, Scott MacArthur.
Me, Paul Craig. Thank you.
And please remember, we've got a YouTube channel, which is my YouTube channel, which is just www.youtube.com/Scott MacArthur, and all the previous episodes are there. We're getting towards 100. 20 to go. I'm at 100, so we're getting there. Amazing. And any questions or thoughts, or if you're interested in maybe coming on the show, or coming on even just with a question, Paul and I would be absolutely delighted to talk to you about that. So, all right, have a good week.
You too.
Paul, see you soon.
See you soon.
Good afternoon, everybody. Cheers.
Good afternoon.